My name is Cora Hayes. I am 29 years old, and I work as a sustainable investment advisor at Terra Vista Capital here in Portland. It's a job I love, one that feels like it aligns with the person I've always tried to be: conscientious, forward-thinking, and quietly dedicated to making things better. It's a philosophy I've applied to my career, my friendships, and most of all, my family. When I agreed to finance the complete transformation of my parents' backyard into the tranquil Japanese garden my mother had dreamed of for decades, a project totaling just over $14,000, I truly believed I was investing in our family's happiness. I never imagined that the first person to call me about the celebratory party to be held in that garden would be my own aunt, calling to tell me I wasn't invited. For as long as I can remember, I have equated family with a kind of unconditional belonging, a safe harbor. But that phone call was the first tremor of a coming earthquake, one that would shake the very foundations of that belief and reveal just how conditional my place in that harbor truly was. I grew up in a quiet, tree-lined suburb just outside Portland, where the scent of damp earth and pine needles was a constant presence. Our home was a modest but well-kept split level, a testament to my father's practicality and my mother's quiet homemaking. My parents, David and Helen Hayes, were good people who loved their children, but their love was expressed through a lens of expectation. From my earliest days, I was cast in the role of the responsible one. Cora, the planner, the straight-A student, the one who would build a stable, successful life. My bedroom was a gallery of academic awards and honor roll certificates, each one a testament to my quiet compliance with the future they envisioned for me. My younger brother, Julian, for years my junior, was cast in a different role. He was the artist, the free spirit, the one who followed his heart. Where my path was a straight line paved with scholarships and sensible decisions, his was a winding trail of garage bands, poetry slams, and a deep-seated belief that life was meant to be felt, not just planned. My parents worried about him, but they also adored him for his untamed spirit. He was currently a part-time music teacher, happily married to his college sweetheart, Sophie, with their first child on the way. His financial contributions to the family were never expected. He was, in their words, building his own life. My own journey was one of hard work and deferred gratification. I earned a full scholarship to the University of Oregon, studied finance with a focus on environmental, social, and governance criteria, and graduated with honors. I moved into a small apartment in Portland and began my career, slowly, diligently, building my own life on a foundation of responsibility. The financial dynamic with my parents shifted almost as soon as I received my first real paycheck. I was 23, barely making ends meet, but they saw my steady income as a family resource. It started with small things: a few $100s for a new water heater, a contribution toward property taxes when money was tight, covering the insurance deductible when Dad needed an unexpected minor surgery. I never hesitated. It felt like the right thing to do, a way of repaying the love and support they'd given me. Over the years, these small requests grew into a silent expectation. When Julian needed a more reliable car to transport his instruments, I provided the down payment. When their roof needed replacing, I covered a significant portion of the cost. The initial expressions of profuse gratitude slowly faded, replaced first by casual thanks and then by a quiet assumption that I would always be there to fill the gaps. The house they live in, the house I grew up in, is their anchor. It's where holidays happened, where memories were woven into the very fabric of the walls. But the backyard was always a source of quiet disappointment for my mother. It was a blank canvas of patchy grass and a crumbling concrete patio, a space that never lived up to the potential she saw in it. She would often stand at the kitchen window, sighing, a world of unrealized beauty visible only to her. Aunt Jean, my mother's younger sister, is her closest confidant. They speak on the phone every day, their opinions and mannerisms mirroring each other. Jean has always championed my role as the dependable daughter. "Your parents are so lucky to have you, Cora," she'd say, often in the same breath she'd use to remind me of all the sacrifices they'd made to ensure my success. Despite my professional achievements, I had recently been promoted to a senior advisor role and had just bought a beautiful loft in the Pearl District. I still found myself measuring my self-worth by the barometer of my parents' approval. From the outside, I was the image of independent success. Inside, a part of me was still that young girl, taping another certificate to the wall, hoping it would be enough. My promotion had finally granted me a degree of financial freedom I'd never known. After years of careful saving and modest living, I could breathe. I had been planning a trip to Southeast Asia, my first real vacation in over a decade. But one Sunday evening, as my mother showed me a book of Japanese garden designs, her eyes alight with a long-dormant dream, I saw a different kind of opportunity. An opportunity to give a gift so significant it could not possibly be taken for granted. "Mom, what if we actually did this?" I'd said, my voice soft. "I just got that promotion, and I'd love to use some of it to make this happen for you and Dad." I didn't know it then, but in making that offer, I was setting the stage for one of the most painful and liberating lessons of my life. The conversation about the garden began on a cool spring evening, the scent of blooming jasmine drifting in through the open kitchen window. Mom had made her signature salmon with dill sauce, and as we sat around the familiar oak table, she pulled out a worn, coffee table book. Its pages were filled with images of raked sand, moss-covered stones, and delicate Japanese maples. "Can you imagine," she murmured, tracing the outline of a stone lantern with her finger, "having a place of peace like this? A place to just sit and be quiet." Her voice held a wistful quality that tugged at my heart. For years, her artistic sensibilities had been sublimated to the practical demands of raising a family and managing a household. Dad, ever the pragmatist, peered over his glasses at the glossy photos. "Beautiful, Helen, but that kind of landscaping costs a fortune. We're on a fixed income now. It's a nice dream, is all." I watched the light dim in my mother's eyes, a familiar flicker of resignation. She had given up so many of her own dreams for us. This felt like one I could give back to her. What if it wasn't just a dream? I ventured, my words hanging in the quiet space between us. "I could help. My promotion was significant. I'd love to do this for you." The shift in the room's atmosphere was palpable. Mom's head lifted, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and hope. Dad's brow, usually furrowed with financial concern, smoothed over. The practical barrier he had just erected seemed to dissolve into mist. "You'd really do that, Cora?" Mom whispered. "I'd love to," I affirmed, my own excitement growing with hers. "Let's get what you really want. No compromises." That evening marked the beginning of a shared project that felt, at first, like a beautiful collaboration. I took time off work to accompany them to nurseries and landscape design firms. We looked at basalt stone quarried from the Cascades, discussed the merits of different species of bamboo, and chose a Japanese maple with leaves the color of deep wine. My mother, who usually deferred to my father on large expenses, became animated and decisive. She wanted a dry creek bed, a small bamboo water feature, a shishirodoshi, and a stone bench positioned perfectly to catch the morning sun. We chose a highly regarded local company, Verdenscapes, known for their artistry in creating naturalistic gardens. The lead designer, a man named Kenji, listened intently to my mother's vision and sketched a design that brought tears to her eyes. The initial quote was for $11,500, a significant sum, but for the quality and scope of the work, it felt right. I met with Kenji to sign the contracts and arrange the payment schedule. I would be the sole financial contact, a detail that seemed to simplify things for everyone. The project was scheduled to take about 8 weeks, with a target completion of mid-July. This, my parents decided, would be perfect. Their 40th wedding anniversary was at the end of July, and they could host a celebratory dinner for the family in their new garden. "It will be the perfect debut," Mom had exclaimed, her face glowing. We'll finally have a space beautiful enough to host everyone properly. As the project began, I fell into a comfortable rhythm of visiting the house every weekend. I'd bring coffee and pastries for the crew and walk the grounds with my mother, marveling at the transformation. The lumpy, uneven lawn was excavated and replaced with carefully graded earth. Large, moss-flecked boulders were placed with crane-like precision. It was deeply satisfying to watch my financial contribution take physical form, to see it creating a place of beauty and peace for the people I loved. But as the garden took shape, so did a subtle, unsettling pattern. My mother and Aunt Jean were in constant communication about the anniversary party. I'd arrive at the house to find them huddled over a notebook, which would be quickly closed when I entered the room. When I'd ask about the plans or offer to help with invitations or catering, their answers were consistently vague. "Oh, we're still working out the details, honey," Mom would say with a breezy wave of her hand. "You're doing so much with the garden. We don't want to burden you with party planning." I tried to dismiss the feeling of being shut out. I was working long hours at Terra Vista, and it was true that I didn't have much spare time. They were probably just trying to be considerate. Meanwhile, the project costs began to creep upward. My mother decided the initial lighting plan was too subtle and wanted to add uplighting for the maple tree and path lights along the stone walkway. My father, who had been swept up in the excitement, suggested a more robust irrigation system. Each change added hundreds, then thousands, to the budget. I approved them all, wanting the garden to be perfect. The total cost climbed from $11,500 to over $14,000. When my mother fell in love with a beautiful, hand-carved granite bench that cost an additional $800, I didn't hesitate. "Order it," I told her over the phone. "It will be the heart of the garden." I rationalized the ballooning expense by imagining the anniversary party. I pictured my parents, surrounded by family, proudly showing off their incredible new garden. I imagined my father putting his arm around my shoulder and saying, "Cora made all of this possible." That single, imagined moment of genuine, public acknowledgement felt worth any price. It would be the ultimate validation, proof that I was more than just the family's emergency fund. I was a cherished contributor to their happiness. In retrospect, the signs were as clear as the basalt stones lining the new pathways. The whispered phone calls, the closed notebooks, my brother Julian's averted gaze when I asked about the party guest list. But I was so invested, financially and emotionally, in the narrative I had created for myself, a story of the devoted daughter finally earning her place in the sun, that I refused to see the truth. I was building a beautiful stage for a play in which I was not even a minor character. The final touches were completed in the second week of July. The shurshuro-doshi made its rhythmic, hollow knock as it filled with water and tipped over. The moss was a vibrant green carpet between the stones. The granite bench sat serenely under the shade of the new maple tree. It was, by all accounts, a masterpiece. "It's more beautiful than I ever dreamed," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion, as we stood together on the new patio. My father, a man of few words, simply looked at me and nodded, a rare, unguarded smile on his face. "You did a good thing here, Cora. A very good thing." In that moment, basking in their profound gratitude, I felt a deep sense of peace. The money, the postponed vacation, the hours spent managing the project, it had all been worth it. I felt closer to them than ever, certain that this grand gesture had finally shifted our dynamic for good. I was completely, blissfully, and dangerously unprepared for what was to come. The betrayal arrived not with a bang, but with a casual, cheerful phone call on a Saturday morning. I was in my loft, sipping a cup of tea and looking out at the gray Portland sky, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. The final payment to Verdenscapes had cleared the day before. The project was complete. All that remained was the celebration. My phone buzzed on the countertop. It was Aunt Jean. "Cora, sweetie," she began in her usual effusive tone. "I was just on the phone with your mom, finalizing the catering for the anniversary dinner. She mentioned you weren't bringing a plus one, and I just wanted to double-check before I gave them the final head count. I frowned, confused. A plus one? I'm not really seeing anyone right now. Mom knows that. There was a slight pause on her end. Oh. Well, that's fine then. It keeps the numbers down, which is probably for the best. What do you mean? I asked, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. Another, longer pause. I could hear the faint sound of a television in the background. Well, your mom and dad wanted to keep it small. Just the immediate family. A really intimate affair to mark the day itself. My teacup clinked against its saucer as I set it down, my hand suddenly unsteady. Immediate family? Aunt Jean, what are you talking about? The whole point of finishing the garden was to host the big family anniversary party at the end of the month. Oh, that's still happening, she said brightly, completely oblivious to the bomb she had just detonated. They've booked the community hall by the lake for September. That's for everyone, all the cousins and old friends. This dinner at the end of the month, in the new garden, is just for us. Your parents, me and your uncle, Julian and Sophie, and your grandparents. Very cozy. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I felt the air leave my lungs. Just for us. A group that did not include me. Let me make sure I understand, I said, my voice thin and distant, as if it belonged to someone else. I paid $14,000 to renovate the backyard so my parents could host an anniversary dinner that I am not invited to attend. Oh, Cora, don't say it like that. It sounds so transactional, she chided gently. Of course, they appreciate what you did. It's a magnificent gift. I think they just assumed, you're so busy with your career and they didn't want you to feel obligated to come to another small family thing. I'm sure they were going to tell you. The platitudes washed over me, meaningless noise. The only words that mattered were the ones she'd spoken first. Just the immediate family. When was this intimate dinner planned, Jean? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She hesitated. Oh, goodness. I suppose we started talking about it a couple of months ago, when they first decided to ask you about the garden. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a recent change of plans. They had known from the very beginning. They had watched me pour my heart, my time, and a substantial amount of my savings into this project, all while knowing they intended to exclude me from its inaugural celebration. I have to go, I managed to say. Cora, honey, don't be upset. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. I ended the call, my thumb pressing the screen with a finality that felt like severing a cord. For a long moment, I just stood there in my silent kitchen, staring at the rain-streaked window. The warmth I had felt just moments before had been replaced by an icy cold that spread from my chest outwards. Every hushed conversation, every closed notebook, every evasive answer now made perfect, horrifying sense. They hadn't been trying to avoid burdening me. They had been actively concealing the truth. I called my mother. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I called my father. The same. I sent a single, stark text to both of them. Aunt Jean just told me about the immediate family dinner. Is it true I'm not invited to the party in the garden I paid for? The reply, when it came 15 minutes later, was from my father. It was 4 words long. Don't be so dramatic. Don't be so dramatic. The casual dismissal of my pain was more wounding than the exclusion itself. There was no apology, no explanation, not even an acknowledgement that I might have a right to be hurt. I was simply being overly emotional and inconvenienced to their plans. The betrayal felt absolute. I had been used, not as a daughter, but as a means to an end. A deep, shuddering sob escaped me, a sound of such profound grief that it startled me. I slid down the kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the cool tile floor, my arms wrapped around my knees. And for the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to feel the full, crushing weight of this dynamic. I was their safety net, their problem solver, their financial backstop. But I was not, it seemed, their family. Not in the way that mattered. The tears came then, hot and furious. Tears for the little girl who just wanted to make her parents proud, for the young woman who had sacrificed her own dreams for theirs, and for the adult who had just learned, in the cruelest way possible, that her worth in her family was purely functional. I cried until my head ached and my chest was hollow. And when the storm of emotion finally passed, something else began to form in the quiet emptiness, a cold, clear, and unshakable resolve. This would not happen again. I would not let it. I got to my feet, wiped the tears from my face, and began to think. The rest of that Saturday passed in a suspended state of grief and anger. By Sunday morning, the fog had burned away, leaving behind a sharp, painful clarity. The years of quiet sacrifice, of putting their needs before my own, now seemed not like acts of love, but like payments on a debt I never should have owed. I called my best friend, Lena, a lawyer whose clear-headed advice had guided me through more than one difficult situation. I laid out the whole story, from the initial offer to my father's forward text. "Cora," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth and full of a cold fury on my behalf. "This is not just inconsiderate. This is calculated. They used you." "I keep thinking I'm overreacting," I confessed, my voice still shaky. "He told me not to be dramatic." "That's what people say when they don't want to be held accountable for the pain they've caused," Lena stated firmly. "You spent $14,000 on a gift, based on a shared understanding that you would be part of its enjoyment. They broke that trust. Your feelings are not dramatic. They are a direct and proportional response to a deep betrayal. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet," I said. "But I know I can't let this go. Not this time." After the call, I opened my laptop and began to go through my files. I had copies of every contract and invoice from Verdenscapes. I had paid in 3 installments. The final payment, for just over $4,000, had cleared on Friday. However, I remembered my last conversation with Kenji. The hand-carved granite bench and the upgraded lighting system had been sourced from specialty artisans. Their invoices were separate and were scheduled to be paid out by Verdenscapes at the end of the following week. Furthermore, I had prepaid a seasonal maintenance package for $1,500 to cover upkeep for the rest of the summer and fall. That money was being held in escrow. Legally, my position was clear. I was the client. The contracts were between me and Verdenscapes. The work was on my parents' property, but the financial obligation was entirely mine. I had the authority to alter or cancel any outstanding arrangements. A plan began to form, not out of spite, but out of a desperate need to reclaim some sense of agency. For my entire life, I had been passive in my relationship with them, giving whatever was asked or implied, hoping for appreciation in return. It was time to set a boundary. A real one. One with consequences. I composed a carefully worded email to Kenji at Verdenscapes. I praised his team's beautiful work, then stated my purpose. Due to a significant and unforeseen family matter, I need to halt any further payments related to the Hayes project. Specifically, I am requesting that you hold the pending payments to the third-party artisans and freeze the prepaid maintenance account, effective immediately. Please call me to confirm. Next, I drafted a text to my parents. It was short and devoid of emotion. I have instructed Verdenscapes to freeze the prepaid maintenance fund and halt the final payments to their subcontractors. Since I am not considered part of the immediate family for the inaugural celebration, I am no longer willing to fund it. I am open to discussing this when you are ready to have an honest conversation. My thumb hovered over the send button. This was the point of no return. A part of me, the part conditioned for decades to keep the peace at all costs, screamed at me to stop, to delete the message, to just absorb the hurt as I always had. But then I pictured my father's text message. "Don't be so dramatic." And I pressed send. I set my phone down on the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt a terrifying cocktail of emotions, fear of their reaction, guilt over causing a conflict, but also a bright, sharp spike of exhilaration. It was the feeling of a locked door finally being kicked open. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the inevitable storm. I made notes, listing specific examples from over the years, not as ammunition, but as anchors to keep me grounded in my reality when they tried to gaslight me. I thought about what I truly wanted. It wasn't the money back. It was acknowledgement. It was respect. It was a fundamental shift in how they saw me. When my phone remained silent for the rest of the evening, I wasn't surprised. They were likely furious, consulting with Aunt Jean, planning their response. I went to bed feeling like a soldier waiting for dawn on the battlefield. I didn't know it then, but the battle wouldn't wait for an appointment. It was already on its way to my front door. Monday was a marathon of meetings and quarterly reports. I threw myself into my work, welcoming the complex spreadsheets and market analyses as a shield against the turmoil in my personal life. I had silenced my phone, and it wasn't until I was packing my briefcase at nearly 7 in the evening that I finally checked it. My screen glowed with a chaotic constellation of missed calls and messages. 22 from my mother, 18 from my father, 10 from Aunt Jean, and 5 from my brother, Julian. The text previews told a story of escalating panic. Mom, Cora, call me this instant. Kenji from the landscaper just called. Mom, this is outrageous. They're talking about putting a lien on the house. You have to fix this. Mom, please, Cora. We're on our way to your apartment. We need to talk. Dad, you've made a serious miscalculation. Dad, this is not how we handle family problems. Julian, Mom and Dad are losing their minds. Call me when you can. Julian, whatever is going on, maybe I can help mediate. I took a few deep breaths, my carefully constructed professional calm beginning to fray. I knew what was waiting for me. Instead of calling back, I drove home, rehearsing the calm, firm things I wanted to say. As I turned into the guest parking area of my building, my headlights swept across my father's familiar Subaru. They were here. The confrontation was no longer an abstract future event. It was waiting for me on the 5th floor. The elevator ride felt impossibly slow. When the doors opened onto my hallway, I could hear my mother's voice, sharp and strained, echoing in the quiet corridor. She was knocking on my door, a rapid, insistent rhythm. Cora Hayes, I know you're in there. Your car is in the garage. Open this door right now. This has gone far enough. I paused at the end of the hall, hidden from their view. My father stood a few feet behind her, his arms crossed, a thunderous expression on his face. My mother, who valued appearances above almost all else, was making a scene. Her hair was askew, and her voice was shrill. A neighbor's door cracked open and then quickly shut. This raw, unfiltered display of their panic was revealing. I stepped into view, my footsteps silent on the thick carpet. My father saw me first. He touched my mother's arm, and she spun around. There you are, she cried, her voice a mixture of relief and fury. What have you done? The artisans who made the bench and the lights are demanding payment, and Kenji says you've frozen everything. Do you know how humiliating this is? I walked past them and unlocked my door, my hands steady. We can talk inside. The moment the door clicked shut behind us, the dam of her restraint broke. How could you do this to us? After everything? This is a complete betrayal. You need to call Kenji and tell him this was all a terrible mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Mom, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I placed my bag on the island and turned to face them. It was a decision. A decision based on what? My father demanded, his voice a low growl. Based on a childish tantrum because you weren't invited to a dinner party? It wasn't just a dinner party, I countered, looking from him to my mother. It was the celebration we planned the entire renovation around. A celebration I funded, that I was then deliberately and secretly excluded from. My mother had the grace to look uncomfortable. Jean should never have said anything. It's just a small family get-together. The big party is in September. But this is the one happening in the garden, I stated. The garden that exists because of me. The one you'll be sitting in with everyone, except me. Julian and Sophie, Aunt Jean and Uncle Mark, Grandma and Grandpa. Everyone but the daughter who paid for it. A knock on the door made us all jump. I opened it to find Julian standing there, his expression deeply troubled. "I got Mom's frantic voicemail," he said, stepping inside. "I figured I should be here." His presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. My mother, suddenly conscious of a wider audience, lowered her voice. "Julian, thank goodness. Tell your sister she's being unreasonable. She's jeopardizing the house over a simple misunderstanding." Julian looked from our parents to me, and for the first time, I saw an ally where I had only ever seen the favored son. "Actually," he said slowly, "I don't think she is. I told you guys this was a bad idea from the start." My mother looked as if he'd slapped her. "What are you talking about? You accepted a massive gift from Cora for a party you knew she wasn't invited to. How did you think she would feel when she found out?" "It's not right, Mom." A heavy silence descended on the room. My father paced to the window, his back to us. My mother sank onto a bar stool, her anger deflating into wounded confusion. "So you're both ganging up on me now," she whispered. "After all we've done for you?" It was the line I had been waiting for, the invisible chain of obligation they had used to tether us for years. "This isn't about being against you," I said, my voice softening slightly. "This is about asking you to see a pattern. I am the family emergency plan. I pay for roofs and cars, and even your son's tuition, which you told him came from your savings." Julian's head snapped up. "What? You paid for my last year of college? Mom, you told me you cashed in some bonds." The air crackled with unspoken truths. "We need to deal with the present crisis," my father said, turning back from the window. "The contractors need to be paid. The total is what, $3,000? $3,300, I corrected. "And you're right. They do need to be paid. You should pay them." "We don't just have $3,300 lying around," my mother cried. "I managed to find over $14,000, I replied, my voice even. "It was supposed to be for a trip to Asia." My father's expression changed. The anger was replaced by a look of weary calculation. "We could just postpone the dinner," he muttered. "Tell everyone there's an issue with the garden." "David," my mother gasped. "Grandma and Grandpa are flying in." "Then invite Cora," Julian said simply. "It's the obvious solution." "It's not about the dinner anymore," I said, looking at each of them in turn. "It's about being seen as a person, not a resource. It's about being treated with the same consideration you give Julian. It's about respect." "We've always respected you," my mother insisted. "No," I said gently. "You've relied on me." "That's not the same thing." Julian came and stood next to me, a quiet gesture of solidarity that meant the world. "She's right," he said. "You've always expected Cora to be the responsible adult, even when we were kids. And I've let it happen. We all have." My father, the pragmatist, saw the argument was lost. He looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time as an equal. "What do you need from us, Cora?" The question, so simple and so foreign, almost undid me. "I need you to acknowledge what you did was hurtful," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I need you to think about how you treat me. I need to know that I am a valued member of this family for who I am, not for what I can provide." My father nodded slowly. "We can do that. And we will pay the contractors." It wasn't a perfect resolution. My mother was still hurt and defensive, but it was a beginning. The foundation of our family had cracked, but it had not shattered. Through the fissure, for the first time, a little light was getting in. As they left my loft an hour later, the anger had been replaced by a fragile, uncertain quiet. Julian hugged me tightly at the door. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. I closed the door on the silence of my empty hallway and felt, for the first time in a long time, completely and utterly seen. The week after the confrontation was defined by a profound and unfamiliar silence. The usual rhythm of our family communication, my mother's daily check-in calls, my father's practical weekend texts, ceased. It was like living in the quiet aftermath of a storm, the air still charged but unnervingly calm. True to his word, My father handled the outstanding payments. Kenji from Verdenscapes called me a few days later. Everything has been settled, Cora, he said, his voice warm with relief. I hope things are okay with your family. The garden is a special place. It should be a source of peace, not conflict. His words resonated deeply. The first to break the family silence was Julian. He called and asked me to go for a walk along the waterfront. As we strolled under the gray Oregon sky, he apologized again, more formally this time. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he told me, his hands shoved in his pockets. About the different roles we were put in. I never really saw it from your side. The weight of all that expectation. I'm sorry I wasn't a better brother to you through all of it. We were just kids, Julian, I said. We were just playing the parts we were assigned. Maybe, he said. But we're not kids anymore. That walk was a turning point for our relationship. We talked for hours, not as the responsible one and the free spirit, but as two adults who had grown up in the same house, but had lived in different worlds. It was the beginning of a true friendship with my brother, one of the most beautiful and unexpected gifts to come from the entire painful ordeal. A week later, I received an email from my father. It wasn't long, but it was perhaps the most meaningful message he had ever sent me. He formally apologized for their actions, acknowledging that they had been thoughtless and hurtful. He wrote, "You were right to point out the patterns in our family. It is uncomfortable to examine them, but necessary. Your mother is still struggling, but we are talking. Thank you for having the courage to speak the truth." My mother was the last to reach out. She called me on a Sunday morning, her voice small and tentative. I was wondering, she began, if you would come over. I've made coffee. I found her sitting on the new granite bench in the garden. The shurshuro-doshi made its steady, rhythmic sound in the background. For a long time, we just sat in silence, listening to the garden breathe around us. I miss you, she finally said, not looking at me. The house is too quiet. I've missed you too, Mom. I didn't understand, she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. I truly didn't see it. In my mind, giving to family wasn't a transaction. It was just love. I never stopped to think about how it might feel for you to always be the one giving. I wanted to give, I told her honestly. I love you both. I just wanted to feel like I was a part of the family, not just its foundation. She finally turned to me, her eyes glistening. You are the heart of this family, Cora. We just forgot to tell you. She reached out and took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I am so sorry we hurt you. It was the apology I had needed to hear, offered without justification or defense. It was a bridge across the chasm that had opened between us. We sat there for another hour, talking more openly than we ever had before. We talked about her dreams of being an artist, and my fears of never being good enough. We talked about the roles we had all played, and the possibility of writing new ones for ourselves. The 40th anniversary dinner was quietly postponed and then rescheduled for late September. It was a smaller affair than originally planned for the community hall, held right there in the garden. It was perfect. All the cousins and grandparents were there. This time, I was not only invited, but was an integral part of the planning. During the meal, my father stood up to make a toast. He raised his glass. To my wife, Helen, on 40 wonderful years, he began. Then he turned his gaze to me. And to my daughter, Cora. Her generosity gave us this beautiful space, but it was her wisdom and her courage that reminded us what it truly means to be a family. We are grateful for both. In the months that followed, things were not always perfect. Decades-old habits are hard to break. There were moments of backsliding, of falling into old communication patterns. But the difference was that now we could talk about it. I could say, "Dad, that feels like an expectation," or "Mom, I need you to consider my perspective here," and they would listen. Our relationship was no longer an unspoken contract of obligation. It was an ongoing conversation. The following spring, I finally took my trip. As I sat at a small cafe in Kyoto, Looking out at a centuries-old Zen garden, I thought about the one I had helped build back home. It had been born of my desire for approval, but it had ultimately become a catalyst for something far more valuable: authenticity. It had forced a painful, necessary reckoning that had allowed our family to rebuild on a foundation not of expectation, but of genuine, mutual respect. I took out a postcard, a beautiful image of a stone lantern shrouded in mist. I wrote a simple message to my parents. Thinking of you. Thank you for being willing to grow with me. All my love, Cora. I knew, with a certainty that warmed me from the inside out, that they would understand.